Good morning, everybody. How is Cisco life? Do you feel good? Welcome to my session, and thanks for being here. So we start now the day with about 2 hours of DNA Center and IT service management, or even in general integration, but with a specific view of IT service management. So let me ask a couple of questions before we dig into the session. How many of you have DNA Center at home, in your lab, in production, in pilot, know about it? Okay, cool. So this is increasing now every single year, which I like, because last year it was kind of very low, and we are doing better now right now. Second thing is, how many are out of IT service management? Is this your primary role, or only a few? Okay, so most of you are from the infrastructure view, network operating. That is good, because I want to close the gap between the two, and I will give you a lot of examples why I do this and why I feel this is important. So I'm not talking about agendas, but I talk about my accent. So I'm from Germany, so I may have an accent. If you don't get it, what I'm talking, please ask me. So don't make me guilty, because I cannot do anything against it, but I do my very best to be slow. I hope I keep slow. Normally I get very fast. So, but at least if you don't get the point, please let me repeat it. I'm happy to do this. Next thing is about transformation. It's about the new way. I mean, processes are actually built for people. And I worked in a company, and you will see this on the next slide when I introduce myself, and we had tons and thousands of processes. And the people were employed for the processes, to fulfill processes. And believe me or not, I don't feel that is correct, because the processes are built for helping people, employees, operators, service managers, whatever personas you have in this environment. I think it's super important that we get back to this position. Maybe this is not true for everybody, so also forgive me. I'm presenting fairly black and white. I know it sometimes is fairly different, but I want to keep you awake and give you some examples how reality is, and I see this in real customers. So it is very important. So how many of you would love to sit or would go into a self-driving car right now? This is a lot, really. Wow, cool. That is much more than I ever had before. Sorry? Yeah, the comment was we are all geeks, so I'm fine. It's perfectly fine. So what about the rest? Why don't you go into those cars? I think you need to create some confidence, right? The news around self-driving cars were not very positive in the past, but nevertheless, we are on this journey already. On this journey already means something will happen in the future. And the question is, do we participate right now? Did we already participate? Or do we wait what's going on and be then in the bad position to adapt very quickly because the market has transformed? And this is what it's about. So I will give you all the changes. I mean, if you go back to this horse-drawn riding, which was a kind of mobility in the past, it didn't change too much. But the way we had control, or we will have control, will change a little bit. But the responsibility will not change. And I give you more examples. So my name is Markus Habeck. I'm consulting systems engineer out of Frankfurt, or even I'm based in Frankfurt, living in Bavaria. Very long story, so it will take 2 hours to explain where I moved in my former life. But nevertheless, I'm in IT since more than 20 years. I claim myself a little bit a CLI junkie. I'm coming from the CLI. I'm not a very good coder, so software development is kind of, I understood what's going on, but maybe I cannot do the how. I come back to what and how during the presentation. I wrote a book on assurance, and for cool questions, if you raise a question, I have a couple of giveaways, a book about assurance, so whoever is will to ask questions can have one. For all the others, we have tons of them here, so you can get a free example for yourself. On the other hand, I have 2 kids, a wife and a dog. The dog shows up a little later, and my kids participated in my presentation preparation. The pictures are pretty old, and you see them on the bottom, right? On the bottom, the 2 drawings. The left one was drawn by Saskia. She was 4 in these days, now she's 8. And Hannah on the right-hand side, she was 6, now she's 11. So why do I put kids' pictures into presentations? Interrupt you, that's one. But I mean, these pictures are true. What we did is, they played iPad, and they were pretty limited playing iPad. So we ensured, okay, stop it please, and they saw me playing or working on my Mac. And they thought, okay, why do you play and we are not allowed to? And I said, no, I'm working. And then they asked, okay, please explain your work. And you know what I did? I draw core distribution access design with 2 cloud connecting routers, like 4 years ago. And I asked them just to reprint the drawing. That's what they did. How many have kids? You can spend a full afternoon with the kids drawing enterprise designs. It makes a lot of fun. I had about 50 pages of pictures from my kids around this design. What was the most expensive piece in this afternoon? I have girls. They draw in pink and yellow. Believe me, the last rows will not see this. So I asked them to redo 1 or 2 in a color which is presentable. It was very expensive, believe me. So finally we did it. I come back later to the drawing, because maybe one hint to the left one, to the green one, which looks like an elephant. Is this a valid network design? Yes or no? Yes, it is. For sure it is. It may be a little crazy, but there are ring topologies out in the market. There are crazy topologies out in the market because you may not have influence on physical infrastructure. And we do need to support this. We need to support, to automate, to operate those kind of networks. And this is where CI is coming up, configuration items. CMDBs needs to be filled. Topologies needs to be built. Dependencies needs to be known. Otherwise, you cannot control or operate those kind of networks. OK, let's go into this a little bit deeper. The presentation is on Box. I do a couple of demos during the presentation. If my lab is OK, I do it live. Otherwise, I will try to get a recording. You see the recordings on Box as well, so this is for your reference after the session. This is not a software-defined access session. This is not a general DNA Center bring up to speed session, which I do tomorrow morning. This is about IT service management integration, but I give you the basics, what is DNA Center and what is required to get the integration into IT service management and other tools. So we will dig a little deeper during the session, come out to a high-level thing, so it will be a kind of up and down, and I'm happy to take questions during the presentation. So please just raise your hand, and I will try to answer them. Otherwise, we take them offline. How many of you are aware of ITIL? Good. ITIL is a kind of framework where many companies align to and build processes around. It's a service framework, and I don't want to dig too deep into it. But Cisco has a kind of role in this environment. Actually, you build a service. And a service for the network operators is normally the network, which is not true. A service can be a combination of functions or services or options we have. So a service normally is much more. It's much more enriched next to just the network. Nevertheless, the network is a pretty important piece, isn't it? I mean, if you shut down your network, what's happening? OK, cool, no phone calls anymore, a silent day, but business is fairly impacted, right? So the important pieces we are addressing today in terms of DNA is incident management, is problem management, is change management, and is CMDB, change management database, and configuration items synchronization. So these are the first steps we took into DNA Center and integrate this into service management tools. And the book, for instance, describes a couple of personas, like a service manager, like a problem manager, or a network operator, and about the values we get out of DNA and the integration. And I will pitch a couple of them during the next almost 2 hours. So that's what we actually do. We try to align. We try to learn from the market, and we talk to IT service management vendors. You may have seen that we integrate with ServiceNow. So that's our main partner, and this is an official partnership. But this is not limited to ServiceNow. So we expose also the REST APIs for other IT service management vendors or for your self-written tool. But ServiceNow will be the example during the day. In the US, at least, it's one of the market leader, and that's why we picked them. And this is a kind of co-development thing, because they need to do something in addition just to DNA Center. So we already pitched the pieces of incident, problem, and change management. I'll come back to this a little bit later. So where does DNA come from? Basically, it comes from the software-defined networking story we had in the last, I don't know, 5, 7, 8, 10 years. So you may have all heard about SDN. Who can explain what SDN is in detail in 10 seconds? One? OK, you get a book for free. That's for sure. So can you please do so? I can't. So I have 2 things. Can you please pass it through? Thank you. So for me, SDN is a kind of automation and programmability option I can get. It's fairly complex to dig into, and you see some of the comments of our customers in the background. So if we expose this a little bit, I call it Schnitzel dinner night. So this fits it perfectly. We did this term in Vienna a couple of years ago. But what I think, we did a definition. Nobody's really talking about SDN as the primary architecture anymore. Today, we call it as Cisco, and Gartner does the same thing, intent-based networking. It's acronyms, right? So for me, it's important that we define what we can do with automation programmability, and a very important piece afterwards, which we call context. I come back to this because the context is super important for the operators, for instance. So what we have built, just to give you some heads up, there was a confusion when we did APKM. How many of you know about APKM? Cool, that's fine. That was the first controller, if you like. DNA Center version 1.0 was called APKM. APKM version 2.0 is now called DNA Center. We rebranded it. The way we do it is very similar. We changed a little bit in the system, but it's more or less the same. We are now, except of one feature, parity in DNA Center, but we got many more options in DNA Center, like software image management, software-defined access, I don't know, tons of things. I'm not going to talk about this. DNA Center is the piece we concentrate, the enterprise portion, but this is a cross-domain session, right? I will show you the integration into APIC. I will show you the integration into tetration as an example, because operation is not like only the switch or the wireless access point, it's end-to-end. And we come back to a couple of examples. APIC is the application policy infrastructure controller for the data center in the ACI infrastructure. And the fun piece is that those two controllers are more or less the same. They are built the same way. They have similar architectures. They have different ways they operate. They have different requirements to the network. But we have a southbound abstraction layer to talk to the network, and we have a northbound abstraction, a REST API, and we have a service layer in the middle. So they are pretty much the same. Nevertheless, DNA Center is brownfield, super important. DNA Center doesn't necessarily need to have brand new hardware, so it works with older hardware. Of course, we need to check the release notes, but I never said that this is supported. A 2960S shows up and delivers information, even issues which we can synchronize into IT service management. And the 2960 is not in the official release notes. We began a journey in 2014, 2013 about group-based policy. And the outcome was called intent. The intent is the automation piece of the controller, and it describes what you want to do. And a very important piece was missing, and many vendors are missing those pieces or have dedicated products for it. And we built a combined product, and that is about context. So if you automate whatever functionality in your network, like quality of service, let's take this example. You will most likely want to know if QoS is working properly after you have deployed it, and you want to recheck this frequently because you want to ensure that quality of service is doing the business. And this is the hard thing, because you need to understand the policy, the QoS, the design, and the different functions in the network. And this is exactly what we do in DNA. If we deploy it with DNA, we can also interpret all the application behaviors and health scores and quality of service configurations in the network. And the fun piece is nothing in addition, no extra license, no extra configuration. As soon as you have a device discovered, assurance and analytics shows up in the system. So this is the context piece in it. But what it is all about, what is the thing we really matter? What do you think? What is really important for a network? Any idea? On the left, you see features, functions, solutions, video, voice, data. This is what we did in the early 2000s. Today, we talk about mobility, security, IoT, those kind of things, cloud. But these are all necessarily options, features, functions you need to enable to fulfill a service, right? Who consumes the service? Fairly simple. It's the user to the application. If the user cannot consume the application in a proper way, slow behavior, lost connections, the network is useless. And who's guilty? If a user dials in and says, my application is slow, who's responsible? Thank you, the network. I don't have so many books, so I apologize. But if you come to the Innovation Forum, I make sure everybody gets one for sure. It is a network, so you are the first contact point. And normally you need to prove you are not responsible. We call this now mean time to innocence. Right? You know, MTTR and all those kind of things. And this is what really matters. And nobody cares if OSPF link state database LSR type 3 has some issues. Nobody really cares, except us, except the operators. Nevertheless, we need to report this properly. And it would be very cool if a service manager can get information about service behavior real time without asking anybody. And the network piece is one portion of this. Therefore, we have built DNA Center. So DNA Center itself is built on an infrastructure. We call this intent-based or digital infrastructure. Of course, if you get the coolest, newest gadgets, Catalyst 9K, fully featured, then you, of course, have the most options and the most visibility into the network, for sure. But as mentioned in the beginning, it works brownfield. If you have a 3650 or a 2960X, which are both on the release nodes, you still can automate those devices, and you can retrieve assurance and analytics data, and you can raise issues, which can be an outage, ends in an incident, or you raise an uncompliance behavior and raise a change request or those kind of things, right? So that's a super important piece. So DNA Center has the role of abstracting the network layer in this case. I come back to an example on abstraction, but what we do is we abstract the hardware. If it's a 2K, 3K, 9K, it's a different feature set, right? From the software running on top of the hardware, from the license level you use to run the software. The combination of the three ends up in what the switch or the router or the wireless controller can do, right? If I have a LAN-based license, it's a completely different set of configuration than I do an IP service or DNA Advantage. And this needs to be abstracted. Who's the abstractor today? It's you, because you build the configuration. You care about the how. I come back to this later. And DNA Center is actually doing this. So if we deploy the quality of service example, it's fairly complex. How many of you have QoS in the network? Okay, half of the group, maybe a little bit more. So was that easy? Oh, why wasn't it easy? Too many ways of configuring, yeah. Yeah, each device has its own rules. So I give out books because normally I forget to give out books at the end. So of course, every device behaves differently. Even if you go for a 6513 Catalyst and you have 12 or 10 different line cards, they may behave all differently. So the role of DNA Center is to abstract this and say, okay, I don't care. I know what the hardware is. I know what the software is. I know what the license is. I just deploy quality of service. There's an own session around quality of service, but I take it as an example here to explain abstraction. And what you do in quality of service in DNA Center is you define business relevant, business irrelevant, and default application. That's all you do. Then you press on deploy, and some magic happens in the background, and quality of service works. Please do me one favor. Tested it in your lab before you deploy it worldwide in your production and make the network guilty, right? And there may be some broken things in it, but I have many customers running quality of service with DNA Center. Nevertheless, this is just a controller, and if you go deeper into it, many of you may recognize, looks very similar to network management. Yes, I need to admit that's true. Nevertheless, I don't like network management, so we do a controller-based and intent-based networking, and we make this much more simple, because network management gives you data. DNA Center and SDN controller gives you the solution or the interpreted data, so you know what's going on in the background. We don't leave you alone with CRCs. We tell you where the CRCs happened, why they happened, and how to fix them. I come back to this. On top of this, and this is the important piece for today, is platform. We call it platform. It has nothing to do with the appliance itself. DNA platform is the API integration in DNA Center. We had this in APIC-EM already. We have it in APIC. We have it in Tetration. We have it in our collaboration tools. We have it in Identity Services Engine. We have it in Prime. So you have APIs to the north, and you can use the APIs to retrieve data, to build your own reports, if you like, and to push data. And we use platform for the integration, for the cross-domain integration, and we have the examples in a minute. So it is built to optimize your network infrastructure, your processes, your communication between A and B. So it is also built for getting information to technical people as well as to CIOs if you need. So we want to ensure that we build a technology. And if you go to the DevNet zone in the hub, there are lots of examples how to utilize APIs and use APIs. I started the beginning with, I'm a CLI junkie, so I'm not the world best coder, but I learned how to talk to software developers to fulfill or to code my requirements. And this was kind of cool, because by the end, what I did with a couple of new folks in Cisco I asked them, can you code me a bot in WebEx Teams? So in the morning, I just go to WebEx Teams and say, hey, DNA Center, how is live? And it returns me, it's very good, but your core switch is down. Which is an integration. Can also be an incident in ServiceNow. That's what we did. And the last thing is about, of course, changes. How many of you have a change process? I hope it's 100%. No, not really. Not everybody has it. I think so. Is this really productive? You like change processes? No. Why? They're fairly simple. They are fairly complex. Sorry? Again, excuse me. Yeah. Yes. Often it's necessary and it's part of innovation, for sure. And the change process is, I mean, in many cases, complex. My favorite example around change processes is that you have to fill in 65 different kinds of values into a change request to get it approved. I'll come back to this. So what we did in the past, in the early 90s, was CLI configuration. Maybe change requests. What we do today is still CLI configuration. Way more complex. We still do change requests. Way more complex. Is this really all, or do we need to change? This is one of the messages. And the change request is, I think, a must to be changed because it's way too complex. So what we did do is normally manually input into the change request. What we do is fill in the gaps. We copy information into it. We copy the change request information later to the network operator. It's disconnected in many cases. Don't get me wrong if you are not disconnected. But I have many customers, we have a change manager, they fill in the change, the operator does some extra enrichment of this, but by the end of the day, they don't care what's in the change, they rebuild the configuration from scratch, those kind of things. Copy and paste is a big thing, and it's not in sync with the infrastructure, because normally you need to tell the change management board what is the impact of the change. So if you boot your core switch, or if you need to do a software update. And this is the hard work, right? Normally you say, no, it's nothing is happening, it's easy. But what if something goes wrong, unexpectedly? So this is actually what we're working. And the important piece for me is, I mean, today these are all RFCs, requests for changes. Many of them are standard changes and can be done anytime. This is ITIL. ITIL doesn't say you need to have a change window and it needs to be approved. It's just because of majority and impact that we get into an approval status. But changing a port configuration, is this really an approval thing? And does this really needs to be Sunday morning, 3 a.m.? I don't think so. But that's how many companies, many organizations behave. And that is actually something we want to change. Second thing is about user stories, the application I talked about, incidents. So the user raises a ticket. He or she calls a help desk or service desk, however you call it, with a problem about a bad or terrible video experience. So what now starts? Investigation in the network. Oh, okay, because network is always guilty, right? Even if coffee maker doesn't work, for sure it is a network issue. What you need to do is then fulfill your KPIs, check the network, say it's green, push it to the next queue. Good to go. The next queue does the same thing. The third queue does the same thing. The fourth queue, send it back to the first queue. Wow, everybody fulfilled his KPIs, right? What about the user? We fairly forgot the user. The user is still angry. We don't have a solution. What's now? Now we get to escalate a very simple thing maybe, because the root cause was not detected. And I don't want to say that we have a solution to detect all the root causes on Earth. That's impossible. This will never, ever happen. Because while I'm talking, there are new root causes we never thought about. But the idea of DNA Center is to identify as many root causes as possible. We have built in more than 400 of them. We will open up the services over time that you can code your own root causes into it because they may be very specific to your environment. I give you the solution. The third thing is about incidents or problems, if you like. And this is, again, a real example. You saw the employer I worked before. It was a very large airline in Germany. And airlines think in 3-letter codes. And like LAX is Los Angeles, or BCN, if you flew to BCN, it's Barcelona or Frankfurt, whatsoever. So we got a ticket Friday afternoon, 3 p.m. or something, I don't know exactly. I was in the knock because I came out of third-level support. We fixed the problem. The ticket came in, and it stated ROW is down. ROW in terms of IATA is Roswell. This airline was not flying to Roswell. Okay, good to go. We pushed the ticket to Monday. Priority 3, good to go. I just about to leave the office. My manager showed up, or the duty manager showed up and said, hey guys, there's a typo. It's ROW, but it's in lower O, it's rest of world. And we said, okay, seems to be serious. What happened? Network infrastructure was green. It was a network ticket. Network management showed green. There was no impact, not a single thing. Only the few power supplies nobody takes care over lifetime. But that's what happened in the network. So we were blind. And of course, application guys and everybody said, no, everything is in good shape, don't care. So by the end of the day, it was an application issue, but the network operators were in the position to prove it's not the network and to help application to find the root cause. And this is exactly what we don't want to have. I mean, in the former days, this happens like 10, 12 years ago. Maybe we didn't have the tools to recognize this. But if DNA Center gets an information from external data sources, like tetration analytics for the data center, AppDynamics, StealthWatch, any cloud service like Skype for Business, like WebEx, I don't know, what have we? What have you, your tools? And this tool detects, let's assume AppDynamics detect the application is down because there is a process not running on the machine. They know this already. What if we can push this data into DNA Center and tell the network operator, it is an application problem, here's the link to the problem, so that you can get the data, enrich the ticket, push it to the right queue so that they can work on the solution. And this is actually what we are doing right now. So DNA Center and operation, how many know this picture? I mean, not this picture in specific, but how many of you have operations behaving like this? A few, yeah. Some of them with 2 arms. So I see this very often that I have projects I get into. I mean, I'm in sales, so we are selling cool things like software-defined access, and IT tells me, no, we don't have resources available. Resources are not free because they need to run changes, they need to move people from A to B. And actually, that's what's happening, right? The ticket comes in, it will be solved quickly, quick and dirty, finally. Maybe they don't find the root cause. And booting a switch doesn't solve a problem. Maybe it solves this temporarily, but normally the issue comes back in a while. So we want to go back to proactive. We want to free up your time. And the problem with this is to get there, maybe consume a little bit more of your time. But once you are there, you may free up a lot of this time. So there's a little risk behind this. But I want to pitch you into this and say, okay, how about proactive network operating? Because many things can be done by the controller itself. In the future, this may be self-healing controller. Who likes self-healing? Okay, how about all the guys and folks in the room sitting in the self-driving car? That is the same thing, isn't it? Right? Because if you are close to an accident, this car will do the decision. It's not you anymore. We need to trust it. We need to get the confidence around this. And I'm sure that, of course, this is a different thing. But it's funny that we have like a third for self-healing networks and maybe half of you for self-driving cars. Very interesting. So I'm learning every time while I'm presenting, which makes me feel good because my horizon is getting a little bit bigger. So what questions do we have? How about CMDBs? How do we get data into CMDBs? I had a project a couple of years ago, and this project was like, hey, Markus, can you participate in the project filling the CMDB? We just built it from scratch. And I said simply, no. I said, why? I said, I don't want to waste my time with something I enter into a CMDB which is outdated the same moment. And by the way, all the other guys are not talking, because if I build a relation from a switch to a service or a business application, the next guy will remove it because they don't want to have this dependency. So we didn't do this in that way. Of course, we delivered some data, but it should be automated. I show you how we enrich those kind of data. Process needs to be optimized in those cases, so I can assist processes. I can enrich tickets in this case. How about pre- and post-checks? If you do a change in your network, normally you have to check before you activate the change. So let's assume you do an iOS update. Normally you need to check what's going on in the network. Is it working? How many routes? How many MAC addresses? Whatsoever. So that you know after the change, the post-check tells you, yes, that's the same thing, or you had 4,000 routes before the change and 3,999 after the change. Okay, which route is missing? Good job. It's a lot of fun to figure out the single route. The intent of DNA Center is exactly to figure out those kind of things. We have a bunch of post and pre-checks in the system, and we will open this up in the future that you can build your self-scripted pre- and post-checks in the system. Because, I mean, when we say, okay, we are tracing the routing table, maybe for you it's more important to know which device is the root bridge, which is the secondary root bridge. What are the root bridge priorities in the network for spanning tree? I don't know, whatever option is in here. Know the real impact to the network. You remember my story with Roswell and rest of world. And get into a predictability mode. How many? This is normally my standard question at this point. I mean, you most likely have core switches. If you operate them, how many of you will go telnet into the switch and do a reboot of the switch right now? No change. 0? 1? Okay, fair. 2, 3, 4? A few. Why? You most likely have tested this kind of environment many, many times to make sure HA is available and is working. Nevertheless, you haven't touched the device maybe for months or years, so you don't know what's going on. Is this the same configuration? What is an addition? We had an iOS update which has not been tested. Is it behaving like I expected it to behave? So it's very hard to figure out if this is predictable, what's going on. It needs to be predictable if you ask me. We are talking about 4 nines, SLAs, 99.99%. This is 4 minutes and 23 seconds or so. If you get an incident and the switch is down, 4 minutes and 23 seconds is not a lot. It will take even longer to open the ticket normally. If you go for 5 nines, it's even worse, right? So we need to be more proactive, and we need to get predictability. And if we detect that the network is not serving HA, we will inform you upfront. And this, of course, is a vision. Not all of this is in the system right now, but that's what we're going to build, to tell you, oh, we have routing neighbors. We had 3 yesterday. Today it's only 2. Something went wrong. Please, we have an incident. Please investigate. The platform objective is to support this. I mean, we build user interfaces. They may be nice. They may be ugly. They may be not usable for you. They may be perfectly fitting your environment. Right? This is how it is. I mean, Apple builds user interfaces, Android builds user interfaces. You may like them or you may not like them. Nevertheless, what you can do, if you have platform APIs, you can build your own user interface. Maybe your operator or your observer or your installer, whatever personas you have in the network or in the infrastructure, just needs a couple of information, not all of them. So you can build your own user interfaces, like I mentioned with WebEx Teams integration, chatting with a DNA Center. Sounds strange? We have a voice integration in WebEx Teams. You can even talk to the guy. I know that doesn't make sense for network operation, but just to give you some ideas. So we want to enrich this position. Of course, we want to drive this intent-based approach. And of course, we want to enable ISVs so that partners, or if you are yourself a software developer, can use innovation. Because not all of the functions we have on the user interface in the APIs are present on the user interface. There are way more functions you can do with APIs, right? It's way simpler to manage this, but you need to have some knowledge in here. And that's why we start integration, a couple of vendors and our own cross-domain peers, ourselves. We call them bundles in the system, self-written adapters or connectors, if you like, ready to use. You just need to enable it, configure it, done, which gives you a set of functions. If you say, no, that's not what I want to have more functions, you can do this, then you just disable this connector or bundle, write your own one, and you're good to go. And there are a couple of examples on the list which we officially support in DNA Center, like IPAM, IP address management, DHCP connection to Infoblox and BlueCat. If you create an IP pool in DNA Center, it will be automatically provisioned into Infoblox or BlueCat. The pool will be reserved, and DHCP is available the same moment. It's not an extra change anymore. And it is in sync. It's not a copy and paste failure that you have 10.1.1.0 in your network and 10.2.2.0 in your IPAM because of a typo whatsoever. Bad example, I know, but I think you get the point. So how does DNA Center? We go a little bit deeper. I promise I come back to a little higher level thing and, of course, to the service management integration, but some basics are important. About DNA Center. For sure, DNA Center has an elastic service layer, if you like. This is for making it high available, because it doesn't make sense to have a network HA, but the controller is not HA. Nevertheless, the controller is not actively involved in the network. Software upgrades needs to be done. We have a southbound abstraction layer, a very important piece in the system. We can talk CLI, Telnet, SSH, SNMP, version 2 and version 3 to the network. And this is important to support brownfield, because we can talk to old devices, like the 2960S I mentioned. We do netconf in the future. The releases in iOS 16.9 plus have netconf enabled. We can do netconf model-based network configuration, which optimize the flow, because it's fairly quick. You have rollback already built in. They will do some syntax checks and all those kind of things. And we have an SDK. And the SDK is present since 1.2.5. The SDK enables you to get non-Cisco equipment into DNA Center. In the middle, we have a service layer. The service layer is about what DNA Center can do. Actually, it's hidden and only be coded by Cisco, but we may open this up in the future that you may have your own services in. Simple things like enabling a topology, do software and image management as an example. And we have the REST API. That is DNA Center. If you connect to the user interface, that is not DNA Center anymore. That is the application on top of it. You all know this kind of devices, right? Same thing, or you don't care about the hardware. I mean, of course, it's a gadget, you care, but you don't care about how the iOS from Apple or Android talks to the hardware, but you care about the applications you want to press and something needs to happen and exactly what you expect it to happen. And this is more or less the same thing we built in the application layer. So the application layer gives you these applications, like plug and play, software image management, topology, inventory, assurance, those kind of things. And this application layer will now be transformed into a workflow layer, because we don't want you to leave you alone with 5 applications, which needs to be performed one after another to make the network up, to get the network up and running. We want to make sure you have one workflow, give the necessary information, press apply, and you are done. So all the applications will be utilized by the system itself. Platform itself is integrated into DNA Center. It's part of the service layer, if you like. If you have installed DNA Center, platform is not installed by default. If you go, I show you this in a minute, to the system packages, you will see tons of things, automation, assurance, software-defined access, and platform. And you need to download it and install it if you need it. So we don't install it by default. We want to secure the system if you don't need it, so the system doesn't reserve resources for platform. And this comes with a couple of toolkits in it, which we call bundles and REST APIs. And we'll expose this to vendors, partners. And if you go to DevNet and World of Solution, you see a couple of partners and customers who are using our APIs and build their own integrations. There are a couple of things to know, which are important. So we have the network itself, which is part, of course, of service management, configuration management database, configuration items. You need to know, okay, I have 10 switches, 10 access points, 10 routers. Of course, you need to know how their dependency is. And that's the hard way if you do it manually. So we build up this dependency. Then, of course, you may need some tool support, like ServiceNow or other IT service management tools, because you want to use them. If you plan a change, you get into the system and say, I upgrade the core switch, and the best thing is the IT service management tool tells you the dependencies, calculates the business impact, and we take it from there. This would be the good thing. Next thing is we put it into the process. The process then will guide you through what you need to enter into the change, how is the change being approved, what about the change management board, how to get back to the network. Nevertheless, there is a business value behind this. That's why we are doing this. So we want to make sure that first the business, your management, CIOs, whoever, knows about what's going on, what's the impact, is this impacting my business, or how can I optimize those processes to optimize my business, my value into it, and report this properly. And this is actually what we are driving into it. So while we are talking, this guy on the horse, that's me. It's myself. It's one of my hobbies. I think it was on the first slide. Why do I show myself on a horse in a session at Cisco Live? Fairly simple. To get you back to abstraction. When I go horseback riding, I do pure abstraction. If you go, how many of you are doing horseback riding? Okay, I have a few fans in the room. Okay, cool. This is a quarter horse, by the way. It's not my own. Nevertheless, if I go gallop, I tell the horse go gallop. It's a simple command, right? In terms of IT, it's a simple command. In terms of how the horse behaves, it's fairly complex, right? It's not easy to go gallop. The horse has 4 feet. Imagine you have 4 feet instead of 2 hands and need to organize this. If you like, the what is, I want to make SDA happening. I want to do a software update. Under the covers, there are tons of commands sent to the network to make this happen, sent to IT service management to make this happen. And that's what we call abstraction. And this is where I still think processes are made for people. And the idea is that DNA Center integrates the two. That's an important piece, because this is a disconnect in many, many cases. Cool. What do we need? How to get this running? So get a little bit more in action. We need DNA Center, fairly simple. Many of you have DNA Center already. It's an appliance, will be installed. There's an extra session, and if you want, I give you the guidance and the link to it, how to bring up DNA Center. Let's assume it's working. You have the applications, you have the workflow around design, policy, assurance, and provisioning in this case. And of course, you have the option of using the user interface or the APIs or both. So it's not not one about the other. It's more or less you can use both. If you have the user interface for the one group, the other group can utilize the APIs. This all will stay in sync. The next thing is make sure you are on DNA Center version 1.2.5. That's where we introduced platform. Today we are on version 1.2.8, and we get 1.2.10 in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So most likely it's a good idea to be on 1.2.8 today, because we got a couple of more features into platform. That's what we need to do, and install the platform package as I mentioned. On the other hand, if you go ServiceNow, we take this as an example. If you go non-ServiceNow, then there are a couple of more steps you need to do. But ServiceNow has been already coded by us and ServiceNow themselves. You need to have one of the latest 4 versions of ServiceNow. ServiceNow forces us to support the latest 4 versions of themselves. That's part of the partnership. So we ensure that we support Kingston and Madrid and London and however this is called. And in ServiceNow, then you can install the Cisco application in here. So same thing. I go into ServiceNow, and this is the ServiceNow administrator. They need to install Cisco DNA. It's an application. You will find it in the marketplace of ServiceNow. It's free of charge. You just enable it, and then we have the integration. Next thing is we configure the bundles of DNA Center, connected to ServiceNow. We're ready to go. It's a matter of a couple of minutes. It's not a big game. Nevertheless, of course, it needs to be tested. Most likely your ServiceNow or IT service management folks don't trust you. So, of course, it has some investigations. But the way we get there is fairly simple. So let's look into DNA Center, not to do all the PowerPoint piece only. DNA Center, I need to go into, is here. So that's my landing page of DNA Center itself. So for those who know DNA Center, you may have seen this already. And we normally start with a fun piece. We start with health summary, wireless client health, network health, wired client health. So the system is built to give you the first important information. And this is not about, oh, you have deployed 10 policies. Who cares? It's about how behaves your network. What's the health score? And how many of you know ACI? So ACI has the concept of health scores, has it? So it's fairly similar what we do. And I think it's important because now people try to understand each other, especially inside Cisco, to build the correct product, but of course give you the option to use it cross-domain. So the health score is being calculated on a couple of KPIs in the system. If you mouse over the hyphens, you can see these formulas. Today you cannot adjust them. In the next upcoming releases, we give you more flexibility and you can adjust the KPIs. So my network is fairly bad. I'm happy to have a bad network, the very first time in my life since I do DNA Center. Because if my lab network is up to date, no issues, this presentation is kind of boring. So finally, that's what the outcome is. So we also have the workflows here, which is design, policy, provision, assurance, and automation. And we go into a couple of them in a minute. And we have the applications I was talking about, like discovery, inventory, plug and play, license manager, those kind of things. So you have different ways of using DNA Center itself. If you want to install a platform, you just go to software updates. You can go through settings and software updates, that works too, but this is a shortcut. And the system will retrieve it. My system is up to date. But normally under applications, it will show up. So I go to installed app, and we have a tab which is called DNAC platform. Right? This is the piece you need to install to make the integration happen. It's not installed by default, as I mentioned already. So you download it, install it. It will take you a couple of minutes. It's not like a full controller installation. It's something like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes or so. Then this is up and running. So that's in the system then. And then you get this nice tab on top of here, which is this one, the platform piece, which is not in. If you install it by default, there's no platform. And that's actually where we have all the bundles and APIs. So let's go into platform. And there you have a documentation. You have a runtime dashboard. So there you can check which jobs are running, which are synchronizing to IPAM or to IT service management or to any API poller. You have a developer kit, which gives you all the API examples we have exposed. You may get references into developer.cisco.com, which is our DevNet community, but most of the information is inside DNA Center. So we give you the APIs, how they work, what parameters we support, what the error codes are, how to use them. And you can even try them out in the system. And of course, configurations. You need to set up communication to ServiceNow, and so on and so forth. So if we go into bundles, for instance, the one we have here is the first I was talking about, the IT service management CMDB integration. That is built in. If you go a little deeper in this one, you see DNA Center REST API. This comes along. So the bundle with ServiceNow is written to support ServiceNow. If you don't like the bundle because you are missing options, then you go to the REST API portion and build your own bundle, right? Because maybe the ServiceNow folks say, no, we don't want to have this information in that way. We want to have it in a different way. So you create your own adapter into it. And since we have developer kits and all the cross-links into it, fairly simple, on the top right, you have the references. If you go here, then you see that we have API developer resources. It will be cross-linked into the web, and your browser will be redirected, and you get the necessary information if they are not in the system. So if I just do the example of ServiceNow itself, then you see for the CMDB integration what we are doing. And these are the parameters we are going to synchronize right now. It's only, 6 or 7 or 8? I know there are many more configuration items in the database. DNA Center knows about which hardware, which software, which firmware, which hardware, which line cards, which license, what is connected, what are my neighbors, which devices are connected, endpoints, end devices, MAC addresses, IP addresses, routing tables, a very long list of this. We don't want to send everything into the configuration management database because we may not know if you want to have this. So today we are sending all of them. Tomorrow you can select which ones, and you get way more information you can synchronize. And you can start with just a single configuration item, and if this works properly, then you can do the change and go into maybe a full-blown thing or whatever information you need in here. And this is the way we expose this, right? It's getting out in that kind of format, so software developers exactly know what's going on in here. If you go then in the runtime dashboard, for instance, just to give you the view what I did, and we need this later, these are actually 2 jobs which were running in the last 6 hours. So I have 3 things. I have the synchronization of the CMDB, which takes place every 24 hours. That's how I configured it. This is the lowest value. The next thing is about software and image management compliance. I come back to this later, but I run it every hour. I don't think that it is necessary to run more often. And events and issues is running every 15 minutes. And this is because of an issue in DNA Center itself. Our internal poller cannot support less than 15 minutes today. We will improve this. And I know if you have an SLA of 99.99% and see the incident in ServiceNow 15 minutes later, we are in trouble. Yeah, but if you're lucky and the poller is like 1 minute away, you get it, of course, in 1 minute. But just to give you the praxis how it is, in the next upcoming release, we bring this down to a minute or maybe below a minute, because this is super important, right? Okay, now one more thing. I want to go into maybe assurance and give you the list. So we have an overview about my network, overall health score, and you see my core switch is fairly bad, which is a bug in the KPI. It's a single interface with high error input. And this brings the core switch down to 1, and I only have 1 core switch. That's why it's red. But the most important piece below is that I have issues into it. So DNA Center see issues. I have a co-located fabric poll from the border node, or if you like, from the core switch. The core switch is polling DNS and DHCP, and we lost connectivity to this device. We raise this as an issue. We don't raise this as an incident by default. Why is that? Now we are not in the position to say it's an incident. an incident will be declared by the incident manager and not by Cisco using DNA Center. If you want, you can make it an incident. By default, it's an issue. In ServiceNow, they call it alert. And then ServiceNow is responsible for deciding this is an incident, or this is a problem, or this is a change request, or this is a simple alert, if you like. So that's actually what we are doing right now here. So back to the next steps, what we need to do. We need to talk briefly about APIs. I promise I don't go too deep into it, but the way we use APIs is that we have a JSON format which is exchanged between Postman, Python, whatever REST client you have, and DNA Center, and it's very similar to HTML. HTML means we have a put, we have a get, we have a delete, and we have a push. So we have all those functions, same thing, and can connect this. The more important part is we have different kind of APIs developed. There are device APIs. That is the API on the switch, on the router, on the wireless controller, for instance, itself. SSH may be using CLI as API, which is discussable if this is a real API, but we have a REST and a netconf API on the switches, so you can connect to this. But then you do it from your machine, whatever your scripting machine is, to each and any device in the network. The second is the network API. So we have DNA Center, which is responsible of the network infrastructure. You connect to those APIs, and DNA Center talks then to the network if necessary. We have then in addition business APIs or intent-based APIs. From the API perspective, we leave you alone with whatever APIs we have. If you need to gather some data, build a report, you may need to poll, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 APIs, and you need to know what you are doing. You need to know which APIs are available. If you know that, it's good to go. They are documented, by the way. If you say, no, I don't want to run large scripts to build a report, I built my business API, which is correlating multiple APIs into one API call. And this API call is, please give me management report. And this will collect amount of switches, amount of software versions, amount of uncompliant devices. Done. One single API call. So you can optimize this. It's also abstracting APIs in detail, if you like. We have event APIs, fairly important. DNA Center can send information. So to poll DNA Center for an incident, okay, what's the polling interval? Who's polling? But if an incident shows up, and I mentioned the 15 minutes poller we have today, but if I have an issue raised, which I feel it's important, like the P2 thing, I should make sure that DNA Center informs IT service management immediately. So I send this information to ServiceNow to fulfill my SLA, to inform my network operator or my application operator, whatever we have in this case. And then, of course, we have bulk APIs, means we can stream data in both directions. So you can also subscribe to certain streaming data and telemetry if you need, and say, okay, I'm interested in ABC, but not in CDF, whatever. Good, what about the evolution? Fairly simple to the APIs itself. We have objects in the system. Objects are fairly simple, like a switch, like a link, like a software version, the configuration items, if you want. Very, very similar. The second thing is we have task. Task is, please update my device. Means distribute the image, activate the image. This is a task. It needs to be fulfilled. We ensure that it is fulfilled even if we have a failure in the system. The next thing is about workflows, because if you want to do every task on your own, you may have to have multiple tasks running to fulfill the complete workflow, like the software activation. Software activation is distributing the image, checking if the image is there, doing pre- and post-checks, activating the image, waiting for reboot, checking if the image is correct on the system, and do all the post-checks again. And on the intent level, this is like, okay, I don't care about all this. I want to make sure my intent is my compliant iOS version is 69.2s, do it. Fairly simple. All the underlying workflows, tasks, and objects are involved in this, but they are completely abstracted. So how about other integrations? We talked a lot about IT service management. There's way more. So what we have built is East and West integrations. So we can integrate into IT service management. That's what we talked about. Into IP address management, I mentioned already. Into reporting and identity. Identity services engine is integrated in DNA Center. It's a PX grid channel between the two. It's exactly what we do with the other systems. We have the cross-domain thing. We talk to Skype for Business today. It's in the system. You can connect DNA Center to your Skype for Business environment and retrieve assurance and analytics data from Skype for Business. And the reason is to detect the root cause, because maybe the call management in Skype for Business doesn't know the root cause, what's going on, and DNA Center can visualize this. And this will be true for tetration, App Dynamics, and Stealth Search and other kind of things. So I have a list of them on this slide so that you have a kind of idea. If you go to the Innovation Forum, for instance, we show you the integration into SD-WAN, which is Viptela. So what we do is over time that if you create a policy in DNA Center, the policy will be available for the access layer as well as for the wide area layer. You make sure you create a virtual network, for instance. It will be configured on both sides. So it's now seamless end-to-end. That's what we integrate. But on top of it, you see the business layer. The business layer is kind of important because talking about SDKs for third-party products like non-Cisco products or not supported Cisco products, or the integration into IPAM, the integration into IT service management or App Dynamics. By the end of the day, there's a simple ask: if there is an incident or a problem, what's the impact? And there are two impacts. One impact is one user, one building. The other impact is it $1 million or is it 10 million or $10? And there are tools out there in SAP and in others. They have business analytics modules, and they need to get some data to calculate business impacts and business behavior. And the network is a fairly important piece of it, because if the network is not up and running, the impact is pretty high. And it's underestimated, if you ask me. We completely underestimate the responsibility of the network. That was like switching off the core device, right? You remember my question. So REST APIs and bundles. I showed you briefly the bundles already, but let's do some REST API XCORS. So we go to the platform. Oops, you're not. Go into the developer kit, and you see that we have APIs in the system. So we have a couple of things. Know your network is one of which. That's normally in one of my slides. So I can pull data about the CIs, the IP addresses, the connected devices. I can pull health state. I can pull software versions. I can do site management. So if I go to get site health, we open up the page and you get the URL you need to use in your REST call with the API version 1 to get the health score itself. And we give you, of course, the parameters, the timestamps, and of course the error and response codes, which are important for the coders, and of course a sample response where you can have all the different parameters. And what you also can do is you can do a code preview and say, I want to see this in Python, and we will give you a code example how to use the APIs, which is super important for me, because I'm not this coder. I mentioned this in the beginning. It's not CLI. If you are not a Python fan, we can also, of course, go for, I don't know, whatever it is, shell, if you like. So we give you some examples how to use the APIs. You can copy and paste it. They will work. You just need to fill in the parameters. And this is in the system. You don't have to install anything extra. You can just use it. How many of you know Postman? You can use Postman to connect to it. The only thing is we need to we need to authenticate to the system. We are talking now about a system talking to your entire infrastructure. Of course, it needs to be authenticated and authorized. So you need to get a token. So there are some kind of authentication mechanisms that not everybody can connect to DNA Center. Nevertheless, DNA Center shouldn't be reachable for everybody. There's a question. So the question is, can we export to Swagger? And the answer is yes. We are using Swagger in the background. So it's in the system. So another book. I'm running out of books, but that is good, because I don't want to carry them back to the Whisper Suites. You're welcome. So that's what we do under the covers, but this gives a lot of flexibility. And I was talking about software image management. I normally get the common question, can I do a software upgrade just for a single device when I have multiple devices assigned to a site? And the answer is, in the UI, no. By the API, yes. There are GitHub examples. If you're interested, check the WebEx Teams room. By the way, did I mention in the beginning there's a WebEx Teams room? I apologize that I cannot answer questions in the WebEx Teams room while presenting, so I take care about all your questions after the session. So if you have those kind of requirements, I point you to the GitHub links with sample scripts you can use and maybe additional information. IT service management domains. I've talked a lot about DNA. DNA is one piece in Cisco, right? It's digital network architecture. If you want, it's enterprise. Routing, switching, wireless. We brought in ServiceNow. ServiceNow has, of course, the view of the operational management. And the operational management is the one most of you most likely take care of. I thought there were no service managers, or only a few in the room. Of course, there's the service management aspect in ServiceNow. They want to ensure, okay, it's a service. And the service is not only the network. The network is not a service. The network is part of the service. There might be a firewall, there might be an application, there might be sensors, there might be some external data, whatever the service is about. It might be self-service, which is also a thing, right? You can build portals or use ServiceNow portals or integration that user can utilize an existing instance to automate whatever they need. I have one customer, they have a project in a building. In this building, they have a different department every 6 months by purpose, not by movement or changes. And they need to set up the network independently. And they now get a self-service portal because they bind about 3 employees every time to move everybody from A to B. And they should do it on their own. So this is about the service aspect in the background, right? Nevertheless, we have service applications, network, all these entities in ServiceNow and in the service management to ensure that we are service aware. It works. It always works. So why the heck is he doing his dog in the background? Normally it's waking up. Tomorrow morning it's more important because tomorrow I'm present at 8:30. And believe me, this is a very early time, so I'm tired as well. But I'm talking all the time. Nevertheless, the dog doesn't like fire alarms. Fire alarms ends up in, I'm looking for other dogs and wolves and whatever in the area. And the question is more or less, do we need a break? Because we have more or less an hour to go, which makes me feel good because this is exactly in the middle of my presentation. So again, processes are built for people. And it's an IT service management presentation. And we want to integrate the two. And I give you a couple of more examples, and I promise I will do some trouble in my network close to the end of the session. So I will create an incident and show you what's going on with DNA Center and with ServiceNow in that case. But it should be, maybe it's not many to one or one to many, maybe it should be very structured. The question is, how many devices are polling the network? How many of you have more than one device polling a poor switch? Why is that? Historical things, right? We cannot avoid this. Multiple management systems, any tracking systems, StealthWatch, I don't know, whatever is in. It's fairly normal. It's not that this is wrong. The question is, why do I poll the network from, I don't know, a dozen different machines retrieving the same data when the data is already in one of the systems and just need to be exposed? Because the poor switch is just answering those polls, and the poor switch has a simple thing to do, serving the network, forwarding packets. And I know we had in 3750s more or less a couple of CPU issues because the CPU was kind of small and you were able to bring it up to 100% with SNMP polls. That was a bug or by purpose whatsoever. It was not nice. But I want to secure my network. So SNMP is one in this. But if DNA Center polls it and can expose the information to other subsystems, why shouldn't we utilize it? Why shouldn't we use this database of DNA Center? Bring it in ServiceNow, bring it in StealthWatch or your NetFlow connector or whatever system you have. And then you can poll DNA Center. If DNA Center is running out of resources, there's no impact in the network at least. So that's one. On the other hand, of course, we want to do streaming telemetry over time. Means I subscribe to a service. If I poll SNMP and don't limit it with a filter, I get tons of data, and most likely you don't use 99% of them. If I have streaming data, I can just subscribe, or please just give me power supply status. And all the data will not be sent to the system. We can do this. ACI. So we already had the question about who knows ACI. ACI plays also a very important role into it. ACI turned 5 years now at Cisco Live, right? So we launched it 5 years ago. as far as I remember. We have ServiceNow integration in ACI for a while. So same way of doing it, similar way of doing it, same content, but different things we expose because different behaviors in the data center. CMDB, of course, fairly simple. So we know about endpoints, we know about contracts, we know about switches, IP addresses. Service mapping. Service mapping is fairly unknown for a classical enterprise network. I'm not mapping services today. We get there over time. We will have services also in a campus environment and in a wide area environment. But today a service is like, oh, it's a DHCP server. Where does it sit? Oh, it's in the data center. I don't care. Nevertheless, if the onboarding doesn't work because of DHCP, the network is guilty. So we need to prove that we are innocent, but we are not responsible for DHCP. So we try to ping the device or something, and then we hand it over to the other queue. Nice to have this information. I know where the service is, how the service behaves. Workflow management, very similar. And UI, of course, and APIs also very similar to DNA Center. What you have to have is ACI, APIC. You have to have the ServiceNow application running on APIC, and you're good to go. Fairly similar to what I showed you in DNA Center. And then we get this in sync. So in many times, or in many discussions, I get questions from customer, why do you have, I called it domain-specific controller in the beginning, right? And the answer from us and from me is normally, it needs to be domain-specific to be very agile, that we can react and can harden the controller for the environment. And then, yeah, why don't you have one big controller serve everything? Oh, we have it. We have Cisco Prime. Prime does it more or less good, but it's fairly complex. We have a lot of dependencies, and if a customer just buys data center from us, why should I have all the modules for enterprise? So the umbrella above the two controllers may be or maybe not an IT service management for certain things. I mean, I have the data, I have the same CMDB, I can control workflows, I can trigger workflows. So ServiceNow might be your umbrella into this, might create one of the policies. I haven't said that we are not working on a policy engine on top of the controllers, but ServiceNow might be a solution today because it's well accepted in your environment or any other IT service management in this case. How many of you know about tetration analytics? Right, similar thing, very deep in the methodology of the data center, very deep into the system, the services, the server, and the application themselves. Can do application dependency mapping, for instance. Of course, builds up, again, CMDBs and enhanced the information. But this is a missing piece, right? What is the dependency for an application? I had a project also in my former life, and my manager wanted to draw a big picture of a check-in application, airport check-in application. What is, because we had an outage, the outage has a very large impact. It costs, I don't know, 6 or 7 digits before the comma in dollars. So we wanted to figure out what's going wrong with the application. So the network, okay, server, okay, application, okay. But check-in on its own was like, I don't know, 30 applications in the background, and they all have dependencies. And it's not hierarchically, it's also one-to-one and in the background and cross-communication. This was a very hard project to figure out how do those applications work together. So application dependency mapping is super important because if a single component is impacted or has an error, it may have impact of the overall application. And the user doesn't care, right? They just want to board the flight and check in the flight. So this is a super complex thing, but the network is a piece of it, the user behavior is a piece of it, the data center is a piece of it, and of course the application is a piece of it, and that's what we want to bring together here. So also tetration talks to ServiceNow. So if you detect for the CMDB something, of course we check, okay, we already sent this to ServiceNow. If we haven't sent it, we just update it. And add this to the CMDB. If it's a change, of course, the same thing. We change the configuration item in the CMDB. So they all come together, and you see that this is, again, the multiple instance environment, right? I have now DNA Center, APIC, tetration, maybe collaboration, maybe security. It's not a good and not the best solution today. It's a start. It needs to be harmonized somehow, because at least we want to make sure that we have one repository we can use for assurance and analytics. So what we do, I talked a lot about this in DNA Center, is incident management, change management, and problem management. We didn't talk too much about problem management. I had just one slide on it, and this was my airport example when ROW was down. Or in other words, if a client cannot connect to the network, is this an incident or a problem? In many cases, you most likely cannot distinguish in this point of time if this is an incident or a problem. Normally, if it reoccurs, it gets a problem. But it may be a problem up front because we already know that it has reoccurred because we know the impact. 10 buildings, 10,000 clients, right? This is something we need to detect. Nevertheless, we have integration, but what we need to do is kind of, we know something is wrong. What's next? I mean, now I have a ticket, I forward it to the operator. Okay, the operator will take care of it. Traditionally. Means, okay, I connect to the network, see where the device is, ping and trace route and do those kind of things. Very time incentive for many, many things. Always the same procedure. Another thing is, if I call help desk, and you saw my example, I complain about an issue which happens right now. I'm super unimportant in Cisco. If I call Cisco IT help desk, they most likely call me back tomorrow. This is our standard procedure, unless I escalate it. When they call me back, my problem disappeared. And they say, cool, it's solved. No, it's not. What if it comes back? What was the root cause? Wouldn't you like to investigate? And normally they say, yeah, we checked the network, everything is fine, no errors, blah, blah, blah. Always the same thing. So that doesn't help anybody. I mean, for me, it's okay if it's my manager's manager, so the CEO in Germany, for instance, it might be different. This guy is more important, for sure. That's one thing in here. So we want to have some guided remediation and some enrichment. And we want to ensure that if I call help desk, that we get all the data around me be enriched into the incident, the problem, or the change request. And I mean, it's not nice for the help desk person or persona to say, okay, now I need to go and do all the show tech support, show interface, blah, 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 and put it in the ticket. They won't do this. Even they follow the process, but they may do failures, copy and paste things. It can be automated, and this is exactly what we are doing. So what we build is a bidirectional communication between DNA Center, ACI can do it, Tetration can do it, and IT service management in this case. So I can send data, I can deduplicate data, and I can send data, retrieve data. So I send an incident with all the information, and I get the information back from ServiceNow. Yeah, this ends up in a change, you need to do this, this, and that. Change the port configuration whatsoever. And there are two aspects in it. We have the network management integration, where we get a lot of numbers and facts, and we have the operational integration, where we control all the processes, which is a second level above of this, right? So remediation is fairly important. If we go back to the demo, then let's go to assurance. You remember that I have an issue, or multiple issues raised here already, and they are already pre-classified as P2. That's the metrics we have in the system. We think it's critical if a neighbor or a DNS or DHCP server is not reachable. It's not P1. There are a couple of P1 things. There's the metrics where you can check about our configuration, which can be changed in the future. Today, it's hard-coded in the system. Nevertheless, I now know, okay, there are some issues, but what's going on with the issue? And I just click onto the issue and see, oh, I have a neighbor down on VLAN 2003, and it's reported from that specific device here with a specific neighbor over here. And you see that we have a lot of red flags into it, so it seems to be reoccurring. So this most likely is not an incident anymore. This most likely is a problem. Forgive me that I didn't solve it, but I mean, if I solve it, it's gone, so I cannot demonstrate this anymore. So that's one. Now I know what's wrong in my network. And I get a couple of things in here, but the next thing I get is a command runner, for instance. So what I can do from here, or out of ServiceNow, or from a simple script or self-service portal, I can run commands. So I now can give the service desk operator or help desk persona access to my network without giving them access to the network. Sounds strange, right? So I give them access to DNA Center. They can run a command. The command can be copied or enriched into the ticket, but they don't have to telnet or SSH into the device. And the fun piece is, I mean, when you do a trace route, normally you do it from your machine or anything in the network, right? If we see an issue in the network, report a problem, we do the trace route or the ping or the show IP OSPF neighbor from the device who reports the problem, because this is where the problem is. It's not like DNA Center sits at the correct position. So what we do in the background, we just SSH into the device and do an show IP OSPF neighbor. It's real time. It will take for a couple of commands a little bit longer, and you can do it via the API. This is the user interface thing. It's nice. But you can also do it by API. If the API calls it, and we can automatically copy or investigate on this outcome of the OSPF neighbor. And there are a couple of more of them. And my favorite one is the last one, if you like. Let me scroll down. I really like this. I never understood why we write this. But if you see here, the last one is fairly simple. Please call TAC for support. Thank you. OK. This is the last way of the last gate of resort, right? I mean, it's relatively senseless because you know what to do when you cannot fix the problem. Nevertheless, in the upcoming releases, we make this adjustable. So we give you the flexibility and say, no, we don't ping. We want to do anything else. This is our workflow. It's proven. It's well known. So you can delete the ones we integrated and add your own tasks into the guided remediation. And then you, of course, can remove call TAC. Because if I want to call TAC, it would be nice to know the phone number. Let me check if we exposed the phone number at least. I never did this, so this is my first time. Now at least the website. OK, fair point. So that has improved. But you get the point, right? We give you the issue. We give you the view of this. And we give you a guided remediation, which can be used in here. So also, if I go to one other example, I can search for devices. For user 360, I come back to this later, what it means. I have now my Raspberry in my network. And in this example, when I open up the incident, and if it shows up or if it not shows up, this is the part of the live demo, right? Forgive me, I take another one. Maybe I'm unlucky today. Normally, it shows up the impact. Yeah, I'm absolutely lucky. So sorry for that. This might be bad connectivity into my lab. We will see what's going on. Otherwise, what normally shows up here is impacted is 10 clients in 5 different buildings, and we list you all the buildings. So please refer to the videos. It should be in the video. Otherwise, I troubleshoot it later. I don't want to waste your time with my browser troubleshooting. 99% of those pages in DNA Center, by the way, is the browser. And we know about this. We are trying to fix it. It seems fairly hard to fix browser issues here. So, I mean, the curve of the Raspberry Pi, in my case, you see it's fairly interesting. I have a time slider. So what we do in DNA Center, we have a 14-day today retention time. So we keep unsampled data for 14 days in the system. Go to network management systems. They sample after 30 minutes latest. And they sample a lot. So if you dig into what was yesterday 1 p.m., you get something between yesterday 1 p.m. and midnight, which doesn't help really. So that's fairly important. Of course, you can then export this data to a storage to store and make it available for a longer time. But 19 terabyte in the system are kind of limited in terms of scaling. Good, guided remediation. So we have this ecosystem integration, and I enriched this slide with ACI, for instance, and the IT service management tool, and there are a couple of closed loop integrations we have. Because we want to get into the position that, I mean, if I report something needs to be happen, it needs to be solved, and it needs to be reported back that it is solved to close the incident, problem, change, whatever we have. And this is the important piece we have in here, so that we get the visibility, the impact, and enrich all the information in here and keep it workflow driven. And we have an example of Accenture, for instance. I have this example at the very end of my presentation, that we have this integration of software and image management. How does the end-to-end process for a software upgrade work? There's also a YouTube video. I'm happy to post this into the WebEx Teams room, which explains what they are doing. So actually, they detect an out-of-compliant image. They raise a change. They approve the change. They automate the distribution of the software. They automate the activation of the software. They do the post-validation, and they close the change without network operator involvement. So it's unattended. If you want, I mean, you can trigger this. It's only a flag if it needs to be attended or unattended, but the API can drive all those kind of things. Nevertheless, also the results are important. We are talking in many use cases about the automation piece and the link is down, but also if your applications are bad, if your application health score is on 5, for instance, which may be a high network latency or maybe a high application latency. So we distinguish between the two. Because the network might be 15 milliseconds. The application is bad. Oh, who's responsible? Server? Oh, maybe, yes. Okay, let's do an application response time test, what a router can provision in the network today. So we test the application, and if the application delays, like, I mean, if you get the info, it's 100 milliseconds, you know, we have 85 milliseconds delay between network and server. So you have a hotspot now where you can investigate. It's fairly complex to do this manually. It's completely automated in DNA Center in that case. So interaction, we talked about the APIs. We do information push. We push information from DNA Center into other subsystems like IT service management, like IPAM when we do the address management. Whatever you have in mind, if you want to have other information, you can do this. You can push it by email. If you check the release notes, there's no email supported in DNA Center. It officially cannot send emails. It's a very simple Python script to send an email from DNA Center. So you pull the APIs, and you create an email and send this email to a mailer, to a network operating, to whomever, or my WebEx Teams example. So we can retrieve this, we can push this information. Of course, DNA Center needs to pull or to get information from the external system. Fairly simple example, IP address management. You have defined a pool, a /24. You have 250 addresses available. So users are complaining that they don't get IP addresses. That is already too late. The pool is exhausted. Next thing, when we integrate this, Infoblocks will inform us, hey, your pool exhaustion is on 75%. I have an alarm set for 75%. Please enhance the pool or get another pool, a new pool for the users, that you do not run into this situation. Be proactive. 75 is fairly good because, you know, I mean, from the experience that this is not something within an hour. There's also a trending, which can tell you, I'm trending in the system. Oh, every day you get 10 more devices in this IP pool. It's easy to calculate the trend when the 250 addresses are hit and out of exhausted in this case. So that's what we are doing. We give you all this 360 information around this. We integrate those processes between it, and it's overlapping. If you talk to your service managers or your ITSM operators, you will figure out that ServiceNow does a lot of things. Maybe you have integrated with another orchestrator in ServiceNow, which are collecting data from the network, which are enriching the tickets already. It's nothing new. Yeah, there may be another overlap. The difference is that we do this real time and that we know how to deal with the data because we claim DNA Center is design aware. And design aware means we exactly know what a core switch is, we know what a distribution switch is, and we know what an access layer switch is, what a border router is, what a firewall is. So that's important because we don't expect the client to show up on a core switch. We expect to have a distribution switch to have 2 or 4 uplinks, but not hundreds of uplinks. But the behavior of the end devices is fairly different. So we can distinguish between the different functions and roles in the network in terms of criticality, business impact, and what the guided remediation might be and what the ticket is about, the issue is about we go and raise. So there might be some overlaps. Even DNA Center may declare it as an incident and ServiceNow declares it then as a problem, which is fairly okay. Because the problem manager says, okay, I have about 10 of those incidents. They are all the same. So it's not an incident anymore, it's a problem. And the other thing on the the distributing APIs is, what I have in mind as a little vision of myself is, if I'm back in Eschborn in our office in Cisco, a couple of years we had an outage of the wide area network, and you know what happened? Nobody was able to do email, and everybody in the office was calling help desk. Is this useful? So help desk knows 1,000 times that we have trouble in the network. Wouldn't it be nice if they detect it, or if a user dials in, that we automatically inform the users? There are so many ways of doing this. Yes, email doesn't work because the uplink is down, but everybody is carrying at least one smartphone. How many devices do you carry? More than 2? Oh, more than 2? We have 2 at least, right? Laptop and iPhone or smartphone, whatsoever. So these kind of things are in, and they are overlapping, but they are already honoring each other. CMDB synchronization, something we talked about. So that's what we do into the infrastructure CMDB. And that is something where we may need a little bit more feedback on what we need to do, because CMDB is fairly critical if you change the CIs frequently and if you automate those kind of CIs. Another use case or example I did with another customer was they did network drawings. How many of you do network drawings with Visio or any similar tools? Okay, how up to date do you have these drawings? Top up to date, so like status of yesterday night? Why is that? Would it be nice to have this? I mean, if you run into issues, it would be nice to have an up-to-date drawing, right? Okay, we have the network management topology view. Okay, that works. Why do you do the drawings then? Sure. So what this customer did was fairly simple. We took the DNA Center inventory and topology database, and they built a small web page, and they built their own dynamic topologies. You just entered, I want to see location ABC. The script received all the information around the location and drew and showed up the drawing real time. You see the up-to-date IP addresses, all the switches in it, and so on and so forth. You can save it, you can archive it if you want. I mean, that's all up to the software developer to do this. So they don't use their time. I want to stay positive, right? Because it's not easy to change. I don't want to say waste your time, because I know it's not a waste of time. It's fairly important to have them. But it takes a lot of time to update hundreds of drawings every couple of weeks. So they just made it online available. And they synchronize it also against the CMDB, because if DNA Center, for whatever reason, is not reachable, then of course they have some offline things which might be outdated, but it's not outdated like a year. It's outdated like a couple of hours. IT service management in action. Back to my daughter. The initial title of this slide was, do you recognize your network? And people were like killing me, because I'm 100% sure that you know your network. Really, believe me. I believe you that you know your network, because that's your job. Why did I choose this very aggressive title of the slide? Because it's not only about the network, it's about the user connected to the network consuming an application. So how many of you know how many users, which users and which applications are using the network? 1. Yeah, there are some which can do this. There are tools doing this, for sure. But it's only 1. I saw, maybe it's 2 in the room, maybe I missed 1. Actually, that's normal. But it's important to know. It's important about the impact. It's important how to react, to calculate the business impact. And finally, that's why we need to support those kind of topologies. It needs to be topology independent. We will not force each and everybody in the room to software-defined access, which is not solving world hunger, but which is solving a lot of problems. But you need to run your old networks. I have customers, they show up, you can build whatever you want. I have 2 production halls. They are 2 kilometers away from each other, and I have 2 by 2 multi-mode fiber between them. I'm not going to change this, full stop. What shall I do? I need to support those topologies, but I need to operate them, and this is fairly important. So I showed you already a couple of assurance views in DNA Center. And assurance is, I mean, we call it assurance and analytics. Analytics is the piece where we retrieve data, we calculate data. In assurance, we make this data readable and actionable, right? So you have, and this is only the infrastructure view. You have so many different things in the network. Call manager, DHCP, switches, routing, whatsoever which is in. And there are only 3 topics which are fairly important. What is the problem? Where is the problem? And how can I fix the problem? Or the incident, if you like. This is what it is all about. It doesn't matter, all the rest doesn't matter. Oh, what is the involved IP address? Who cares? I don't care anymore. IP addresses are changing every day. Firewalls are open for port 80 anyway. So IP addresses are not too important anymore. If you go IPv6, most likely you don't know the IP addresses anyway. In many processes, IP addresses are fairly important, but it's about the problem. I don't want to figure out what Marcus has as an IP address here on the Mac to do the live demo. It doesn't matter. I want to know Marcus is connected to port ABC or to wireless access point ABC. And this access point is in good behavior, but the uplink switch is in bad behavior. Oh, there's my problem. I can now concentrate on for the incident resolution. I can work on specific cars. I don't want to check the entire network what's going on. And therefore, we have built a couple of views in DNA Center. You saw already some of them, and we call them 360 views. So you have an overall health. It's if you like, a 360 about everything DNA Center knows about. So if you know the infrastructure and the endpoints, good. If you know information from ACI, tetration, Skype for Business, you have more views into it. The second piece, of course, is the network infrastructure itself, network devices, switches, routers, access points, what have you. Yes, and of course I want to know how they behave. Normally they behave very well. I don't know, 80–90% of the tickets are not network related. But another example from a customer of mine, it was in my former life. We prepared a change, 6 months, to change in an FDDI ring. How many of you know FDDI? That was cool times, was it? We prepared a change, 6 months. We finally got approval. There were so many entities involved. And 2 hours before the change, we figured out we have a broken or even defect power supply in one of the boxes. The bad thing was the power supply was down for 4 years. 4 years. How can this be? We complained about our operating and said, guys, we get about 50,000 messages every day. We just didn't see it. So the change was gone. We need to cancel the change and redid all the work. And this is something we need to know. If there is an important issue, it needs to survive in assurance as long as you have resolved it, if you know the power supply is back to normal. And we don't want to give you all the syslog messages. I get so many questions, or can you export all the syslog messages from DNA Center to my system? Yes, you can use the API somehow to do it. It may be limited, but it's not a proxy. It's not a forwarder. Yes, it is important for auditing and compliance, but it is totally unimportant for network operations. Because if you have 50 different syslog messages telling you the same problem or the same incident, the same issue, the same error, do you read all of them? Most likely no. I want to have a simple message, and I showed you one. And there are 3 more. Devices, network endpoints, devices connected to the network, devices used by users, which ends up in a device 360. You saw my Raspberry Pi, for instance, but that's only one. If I call help desk and I have 3 devices with me, help desk most likely don't know from which device I report the problem. So we have built a user 360. Means if you go into Marcus, you see Marcus has a Mac, has an iPad and an iPhone, and then, I don't know, a Samsung device whatsoever, just to have another vendor into it. Otherwise, I don't know if this is politically correct. So they know, okay, cool, he has 4 devices, and only one device has a health score of 5. Okay, I go and investigate on this specific device without asking the user if I can detect the problem. And the 4th or 5th, if you like, is application visibility, application 360. Yes, we want to make sure we know we have application visibility. There's NetFlow in the network, there's performance monitoring and application response time. All data which your network most likely collects today, if not, can be easily switched on because it's built in the platform, and we get information out of it. It is not supported on switches today, just to give you the hint. We only see application data today from routers. We are working on the switching piece and the wireless piece. The wireless piece delivers a couple of application data, but not in the way we want to have this. The code will be improved. You will see way more application integrations. Nevertheless, cross-domain, right? I have an information, oh, my SQL call in my database failed. None of your network operators will care about this. But it would be good to know if the user complains, everything is bad, and you know there's an SQL problem, and they were talking about a database issue. Cool, I just forwarded it to the appropriate queue. So the processes need to be streamlined. Let me open up the slide to talk about this. In the past, it was the correlation normally was done by network or even by operators, if it's a network operator, so by humans. So you get all the information from your IT service management, your IPAM, your network outages, whatsoever, and you need to figure out what's going wrong, what do I need to do next? And the idea behind this is that we go and orchestrate this, correlate the data, and give you the proper information what to do next. This is the root cause analytics piece into it, right? And this is a never-ending development. As mentioned in the beginning, of course, we cannot solve the world hunger problem in terms of root causes because we may not even know about all root causes, but we are improving with every single release to figure out more and more and learn from customers using it and learn from applications and cross-domain integrations here. Which ends up in a more smooth way because it's, again, abstracted. We talked about abstraction, intent. How about riding a horse? Same thing. Don't get tons of data, which is perfectly fit into network management. Get abstracted data, useful data, human consumable data. Right? That's what we need to achieve. There are a couple of ways to trigger an issue or an incident. It can be detected by DNA Center itself. So the infrastructure will report an issue. As mentioned, an issue, a problem, incident, change, whatever is necessary. So it will be in the system. And the second piece is that a user triggers an issue. If the network seems to be good, it may be that I call in or you call in, so you trigger the information. In both ways, we trigger an issue. ServiceNow, for instance, opens the incident, and now the question is who is going and enriching the ticket. If DNA Center opens it, then it's fairly easy. We just copy everything into the ticket and we are done. I give you an example. And if it's a user call, we have the Cisco DNA app in ServiceNow, and there's a button, please enrich the ticket. So what will be done by help desk, they just press the button, or if you like, it's automated. As soon as the ticket is there, service management will poll DNA Center and tell me everything around Markus. By the way, it can be anonymized. If you don't like Markus to be in the ticket, then you have ABC 1, 2, 3. So it's completely privacy correct, if you like. So user initiated, just to give you a couple of background what's happening in here, is that the user calls in, but you have to have level 1, 2, 3. I mean, help desk as level 1, you maybe have a second level support, you may have a third level support, and depending on the investigation, this is fairly expensive, because third level support is not very common, and first level is expected to solve more than 80%, 85%, depending on your processes of all the tickets. It would be nice to have way more, like 95, 98, 99% in this level, because it's abstracted, not to interpret a routing table, just solves the problem because DNA Center knows how to do it, or ACI knows how to do it, or Tetration knows how to do it, right? So it's about OPEX saving. It's about getting people to normal work, making a RFC, a request for change, to a standard change. The same is then true for the prediction of problems. Again, the same thing. It's about trending. It's about getting the proper information, and maybe we can avoid problems in the future. Not raising a problem or a ticket at all, making sure if you change now in the network, enhance the IP pool, for instance, you're not running into the specific problem. Out of compliance, I talked about this a couple of times, out of compliance configurations or software versions or end-of-life devices in the network, devices with a field notice or a PCERT with a security bug in it, configurations which may be impacted. I mean, this is a little bit of the vision behind this. So the idea is, of course, you are running 3.6.7 as iOS version on a 3850, and we get a new bug into it, and we see in your configuration you are hitting this bug. And this bug has business impact. Why shouldn't we inform you? Because you will figure it out one point in time, but you're not happy when you figure it out. But if you know about this, and our databases as vendor most likely do know what's going on, then it's possible. The problem is, how do we get your configuration? We don't get it, because you don't send it to us. We send every configuration to Cisco. It doesn't help. So DNA Center may connect to the cloud, and we have an integration called Active Advisor, which can do this already, and synchronize those data. It's not like we are sending your configuration one by one with all the passwords and certificates. Of course, we follow some security guidelines in here. But this is enrichment, right? We give you upfront the information. You may hit this bug. Please investigate. By the way, this is the solution before something happens in the network, before you have a real impact. Or we give you, okay, this switch is end of life, or this iOS version is end of life, whatsoever. Or we have a new feed notice, you need to replace one of the connectors, whatsoever. I think you get the point. Yes, please. Question.
That you integrate the bugs into DNA. Does it also mean that if you change, say, some code activate, say, OSPF, will that also integrate in the bugs that are valid for your platforms?
So the question is, do we integrate the bugs into DNA Center? So even if you don't hit the bug today and you change your configuration, maybe adding OSPF, and you then hit the bug, that we raise an alarm. So correct? Having said this, it's a vision. It's not in the system today, but that's what we are planning for. We have this kind of tool. You can upload your configuration into CCO, and they interpret the configuration and give you this information. So it's already there. This is a process you can use. And the idea behind this is that DNA Center utilize this API of our own cloud and compare your configuration with a signature of bugs we have and say, okay, there's an OSPF issue, we may raise a ticket with you. This is the vision. It's not in the code today, but not in DNA Center, but it is possible with a direct Cloud Connect where you do a copy and paste. That's one of the plans. Yes, please. Wait, I'm back. I forget the books. I always forget. Good. Go ahead.
What about the model dependency?
Excuse me?
The minimum models to support this DNA.
The minimum resources to support DNA?
When we use switch like 3560 or different models,
Yes.
like wow, can it support?
Okay. So the question is, what do we support in terms of devices? What is the minimum? I mean, we have a release note. Normally, it's everything what is not end of sales inside Cisco is supported in DNA Center in the enterprise silo. So Nexus 9K is a different story. If you want to have third-party devices like non-Cisco vendor equipment, then there's the software development kit I was talking about before the talk. So you can code your integration with the non-Cisco device. It's not nothing we do, but an ISV, a software developer, or yourself, if you can do this, can use the software development kit and integrate other platforms into, or even other devices into DNA Center. That will work. Okay? Good. So closed loop. Closed loop is fairly simple. What's happening? Closed loop is what I'm talking about all the time. I raise a network issue. I auto-create a ticket in IT service management. I enrich the ticket in service management because I build the context, the 360 view around Marcus, for instance. I copy this into the ticket, so I reduce mean time to repair, mean time to innocence. I should quote mean time to innocence as well in here. The next thing is I get to the guided remediations. So you get a guidance what can be done next. And there are a couple of examples where we really solve the problem with the guidance in this. And the next thing is we may need to raise a change for this remediation depending on your process. We auto-approve this, we fulfill the change, and we feed back the change outcome into the system and close the change request. So we have a clear audit track. We don't want you that DNA Center is doing and behaving on its own, and it's not auditable. We want to make sure that it's auditable, because if something goes wrong, you need to find somebody who's responsible. In worst case, it's DNA Center, right? Worst case, it is like this. And we end up in a couple of examples of network events, but I want to make sure that you see my trouble in my network. So what I have here is, if I go to one of my 6500s, I want to go to the device 360 view. This guy has some issues. I do see an interface 2/1 with a high error rate. I don't know what's going on in the browser. Nothing, doesn't matter. The thing I want to do is I go into the system and shut down a port. And the port is 2/48. Oh, not bad. And if I do, I show CDP neighbor, then you see that my 6502, where is it? No, not in. Here, second line, is connected to 2/48. Right, so I have an OSPF neighborship between the two. If I go in and shut the port, you get a message on the console that my OSPF neighbor and my link is down. And the enhancement we did in DNA Center is that now we get a trap from the device. Actually, we get it from two devices, from the 65041 and 65042. We show the issue for both devices in DNA Center, but we deduplicate the incident into ServiceNow. Because it doesn't make sense to raise two tickets on this because it's the same issue. So I hope that my synchronization in my DNA Center works at the moment. You know the beauty of live demos, but I want to do live demos because it's more reliable. And you see that instead of and forgive me about the time slider which has changed, but you still have gig 1/12, and we have a 1:45 right now. So this incident has been raised by my ticketing. This may take up to 15 seconds. That's why I stay on the SSH client to make it happen in the background and not feel bad. No worries. It really shows up in a couple of seconds. And now I have the incident. Again, we were already in this trouble of, OSPF shows up, not bad, of this specific device. And you see, I tested it this morning, so that's why I'm back to green, but I'm now red because the OSPF neighbor is down. That's actually what I did. So DNA Center gives you the information, and you remember that we already talked about the remediation we have in here for all the command runners we can do. And you can also resolve a ticket, right? So if we have resolved this, if I re-enable the port, you can go to status open and resolve the ticket. That's why I use for the demo to make it disappear in this case. So on the other hand side, let's go to ServiceNow. And it's a real ServiceNow instance I'm connected to. The problem is, I have done this test. You will see my 6501 in here. The problem is my 15 minutes polar. So if I'm unlucky, it takes up to 15 minutes to demonstrate this, which will give you time to run away. So that's why I prepared this in the morning from this. And you can go now into the alert. You can go into the alert and see the details around what's happening. So we fill this alert from DNA Center into ServiceNow. We give you the exact failure description, which is OSPF adjacency failed on that device on that specific interface, right? And of course, you can go into additional information here, and you see all the neighbors. So every information around the 6500 in this case. If you need this or not, it's in the ticket at the moment. Also, if you see that I have a couple of more issues in here. We have the configuration item in here. So that's how we synchronize more or less real time. 50 minutes is not real time, so we claim 5 minutes as real time. That's defined. I guess Gartner defines it by 3 minutes. Honestly, there is no real time, right? Because if I need to process something, it will take some time, so it cannot be real time. But at least within less than a minute, this ticket should be raised in ServiceNow. And now we can take it from here and go into the guided remediation, fulfill the resolution, and document this back and resolve the ticket by the end of the day. Good. Give me 10 more minutes. I promise I will be on time. We are pretty good in time. I don't have books anymore, so if somebody needs a book, I make sure you get one. I promise we still have tons of them. So IT service management integration runs on the architecture level, right? And this is something where I was a couple of confused last year. I had a customer briefing in Eschborn, in Frankfurt, with a very large customer, and they wanted to talk about DNA, software-defined access, those kind of things. So I was happy I don't have to prepare it. I had about 5 people in the room. 4 of them were service manager. So what's wrong? Are you sure that we have the correct meeting right now? No, they said we brought our architect, but we don't want to talk about the architecture. We want to make sure that if we have a new building, bring in a switch, a user can be onboarded, and I don't have to touch this anymore. My service is too slow. Today it takes me 4 weeks to bring a new wired port into a building connected for the user. I said, okay. And this is exactly what we do. We integrate. Use your tool. Do closed loop integration with change management, for instance, and bring exactly this into this. I leave those slides for your reference in the background because they're explaining exactly this. And get feedback into the change in this case. So what's happening in the future story? You remember my angry video user. So what this user did is actually we have a ticket open. We saw your incident because we recognized video has poor performance. Maybe we saw this because of application visibility in the network. Maybe we saw this because of video informed us. So Skype for Business Centers, this video session was bad, by the way. The reason is that the endpoint had a utilization of 100%. I don't know if Skype for Business can see this, but that is possible. So the ticket is completed. Of course, it will be opened in the network queue, but they have all the information. They point the video queue to the correct root cause. The video guys were able to solve the problem, best option, and close the ticket. And by the way, please inform your user about the resolution, because this is also something which is fairly often not happening. The question is, does help desk or the operator call them, or is this an automated process like you get an email with a human readable explanation what happened, because everybody, of course, wants to know what was the fault. And actually, that's what we want to achieve. In many cases, it will work. In some cases, it may not work in this. So a last comparison between network management and software-defined or DNA Center. Change request for upgrade. We talked about this a long time. So if you want to upgrade a switch, it's fairly simple. Request a software update. Fill out the change form. 65 items for a software update. Okay, I have one customer. They really need to fill in everything which is not related to software update, but if it's not in, it will not be approved. By the way, an access layer switch in Sydney, which office hours are between 8 and 5, 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Why the heck can't I update the software version at night in Sydney, which is daytime in Germany or Europe? Okay, that's the change process, right? I cannot solve this for you. That's something you need to do. Identify the golden image, identify the image you want to have for the update. Select the devices which are impacted, which needs to be updated. Create a change request. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, we talked about this. Get it approved. Yoo-hoo, I have some spare time because approval may take up to 4 weeks, depending on the change. I had this live. It really takes easy changes up to 4 weeks, maybe worse. Okay, change time, pre-check validations, switch availability. Do I have space left on the flash? Is the switch in good conditions? And so on and so forth. Copy the software to the switch. Oh, to Sydney, 64K link. Takes a while, right? Okay, I need to take care about this as well. Finally, I get the window, activate my switch in my version, and then I do all my post-deployment checks. So I'm happy, everything went well. I need to close the change request. Let's do it with network management. Oh, okay, network management can do a portion of it. Maybe some of the network management systems can do a little bit more. In many cases, it's even the two of this. Okay, let's do it with DNA Center. We talked about this closed loop. I don't need to drive you one more time through it, but we can connect to each and any of those steps and fulfill this change request. And we can prove that this is working reliable. Of course, it is disruptive, so I'm not sure if this is a standard change then, but honestly, if Sydney office has office hours which are closed during European daytime, why shouldn't it be a standard change which can be performed? I leave it up to you, right? I'm not the advisor how your change process works, but it can be done. The vision behind this is end-to-end in next phases. We want to make sure that you get the end-to-end view, the end-to-end integration. We want to leave any of these silos alone, and we want to integrate our own silos we have, which are officially not present anymore. So the business units are working together, also visible to you. Good. So these are the points we have touched on Cisco DNA and IT service management. We have tons of more ideas. We start very slow to make it usable and to make it very risk-free for you. We are happy to retrieve feedback on this in that case, and we are solving the problems I had in my initial phase of the presentation. So the CMDB stays up to date. Processes may be optimized. Make it more standard changes. Enrich tickets to make it more usable for operators, or even do some kind of guided remediation. And my goal is, of course, make it predictable. Whatever is in your network, in your infrastructure, in your application landscape, make it predictable what the outcome is. So this brings me more or less to the end. Give me 2 more slides next to this, and I'm not going to repeat the slides, to close the session. So we have almost 2 hours of IT service management enrichment. You saw the one drawing. I mean, you saw both drawings of my kids in the beginning, but it is important that I show it here. My daughter will watch the video later on, and if the drawing is not in, I'm guilty, so I need to make sure it's in. But it's about transformation, right? It's about we're giving, again, new tools, but these are solution tools. We abstract the layers. And yes, I understand that sometimes it's fairly hard to get this path. For me, it's easy, right? I'm not responsible for your IT, so I can always talk. It's easy, just do it. Of course, I know it's not that easy. I'm happy to support in any pilots or tests if it makes sense in terms of my location, but that's, of course, something you need to investigate and check and can do here. So DNA Center can be deployed in 2 different modes. In an entirely risk-free mode, which is assurance and analytics and service management integration, which can be read-only. So you don't need to grant write access. Of course, your image update wouldn't work, but you can raise incidents and problems. This would work. Of course, you may start very small in a pilot and not worldwide. I agree. There are a couple of things you need to configure. It's an extra session or watch the configuration guides to make visibility working. On the other hand side, it can be there in full automation so that you completely take control with DNA Center in your network. And something in the middle, of course, is possible. So not all the modules I was talking about, and we are talking about DNA Center, needs to be used day one. They can be modularized. You can start very small and take it from there. So by the end of the day, tomorrow is appreciation event. I hope you have a drink on me. So that's formally what I formally end the session. We were going from very high level approaches a little deeper into the API environment. I hope it makes a lot of sense for you. And this brings me back to processes are built for people, and DNA Center is there for integrating the two, and not the other way around, that you are there to support the processes. This is completely wrong. So for me, I say thank you. Thank you for the interactive session. I hope you have fun with the books. Enjoy your rest of the day, and I hope we see us on Thursday night for a discussion, or if you want to come to the stage, I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.